She comes over to my wheelchair. She will deny this, but she put her finger on my nose and said, I have a boyfriend.
What?
What? That isn't something that we've heard before. Did Ingrid have a secret boyfriend this whole time? Well, whatever she's done, something has seriously annoyed Brian. His boxing gloves are off and he's aiming below the belt.
Por que esse tanto de mulher e nunca deu certo?
But didn't she have 2 kids with 2 baby daddies?
Is this serious? Wow.
Oh, come on, Brian. You're a father yourself. Rule number 1, don't bring kids into the fight. Now, before we dive into this messy situation, let's rewind to the start. So we left Brian and Ingrid both admitting that they'd moved on to new partners since they broke up. They've both totally moved on. There's been zero communication between them at all since Brian left Brazil. And for now at least, they seem okay with each other. There doesn't seem to be any bad blood yet.
Tranquilo, sabe? Ver ele, principalmente agora sabendo que ele encontrou uma pessoa, né?
Learning that Brian has a new girlfriend seems to relax Ingrid. I guess she was maybe a little bit concerned about how it might be perceived if she is seen as moving on so quickly. Knowing he has also moved on and has no qualms about it makes her feel, as she says, a lot more chill. But as their segment begins, Brian immediately leans into his victim mentality. He begins pointing fingers and accusing Ingrid of being put off by him, not because of his creepy personality, but rather because he's in a wheelchair.
I just feel she wasn't ready for it all. She was treating me like her son. Like, oh my God, don't go over there. What are you doing? Oh my God. No, you stay up there. It's like, oh my God, what the I'm not a kid.
Now, Brian also goes on to say that Ingrid used to overreact whenever he took risks in his wheelchair. But hold on a minute, your story here doesn't quite make sense, Brian. He's gone from claiming she doesn't care about him because he's in a wheelchair to now complaining that she cared too much. She didn't want him taking risks. She's damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. She can't win. And by the way, also, just to point out, note the disrespectful way that he mimicked her voice.
Oh my God, don't go over there. What are you doing? Oh my God.
Why is he acting like her caring is somehow the worst thing in the world?
Ficava com medo. Eu nunca passei por aquilo, então é normal eu ter aquele instinto de proteger. Peraí, não passei que vai cair.
Look, Ingrid's a young, protective mum who has never been with a wheelchair user before. Is it really such a crime that she's acted a little bit fussy? She was navigating something new, right? Something that Brian should have helped her with. If he was uncomfortable, well, he could have raised it there and then. But as we know, there are 2 truths that no one can deny about Brian. Number 1 is he likes to act the victim, and number 2, he moves fast. Way too fast, and he expects Ingrid to just be okay with it. Whether that's learning he's a drug dealer who was shot at, learning his true age, or even, as they go on to explain, expecting her to be okay when he desires to move down south.
So I decided to offer oral sex, but once I went to go kiss her stomach, she basically hand in the face, like, nope, stop.
Now, keep in mind, right, at this point, these 2 had barely even kissed. Brian forgot to pack protection, but brought lots of Viagra. Yeah, no matter how he paints it, he was thirsty and in a hurry. Everyone on the cast, well, practically everyone, tells him he shouldn't have just assumed that Ingrid would be okay with that. Now, there is one couple who think that Ingrid was at fault. Any guesses who that might be? Yeah, contrarians Tiger Lily and Adnan. They're of the opinion that because Ingrid got into her underwear, that meant she gave him the green light to do whatever he wanted somehow.
Why wear all that and be like, oh, this is what you could have, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Like, show what I do, like just see, but don't taste.
Não, não é.
Let's just be very, very clear here. That is not how it works. Ingrid could have been completely butt naked and still had the right to change her mind. Sorry, but she doesn't owe Brian anything. Her wearing lingerie has nothing to do with the situation. Her attire is not a green light, right? It's not some kind of blanket rule. No, no, no. Dangerous, very dangerous logic to be spewing. Now, going back to Brian, he also maintains that what happened that night was unfair, but for different reasons. It's Ingrid's fault. It's all very unfair because Ingrid led me to believe that I'd be getting some action that night, Brian whinges.
She's asking me to stop at the pharmacy that's closed, obviously closed, it's dark. Go in there and buy some condoms. I'm like, they're closed. Why are we buying condoms?
Why are we buying condoms? Are you serious, Brian? Have you learnt nothing from Leaky Penis Man over there?
Gonorrhea.
Look, this whole storyline, it's getting a little bit confusing. We were under the impression that Ingrid chose not to have sex with him when she found out he had no protection. But what Brian now tells us is she knew about that beforehand and still played it up for the cameras, got dressed, put on a bit of a show, teased him a little bit, knowing that as soon as the camera crew left, she had no intention of sleeping with him. But whether that's true or not, whether or not that is the case, it still doesn't change the fact, Brian, that she doesn't owe you sex.
She wants to make him feel happy. It doesn't mean that she has to go all the way.
E pode sim acontecer de você ficar de lingerie e não acontecer nada.
Vanya sticks up for Ingrid. She says she may have just been wearing that lingerie as a first step, as a way of making him happy without necessarily going all the way. Baby steps, you know, they could have cuddled, they could have kissed, they could have had a little touchy-feely, a little bit of a massage, exploring each other's bodies without having to necessarily go all the way. But the fact that Brian demanded that, the fact that he threw a hissy fit when he was denied, is such a huge red flag.
So you thought you were going to go all the way, but that's not an excuse to mistreat a woman.
Yes, I know, okay.
There's no grey area here, right? Brian is wrong for having that kind of reaction just because he didn't get laid. But look how he immediately shrugs off any responsibility. He just swats away Vanya's words as if she's an annoying fly.
Yes, I know, okay.
Instead of properly admitting that he was wrong, he complains. He complains and cries that Ingrid rejected him. But then, get this, completely out of the blue, something that has never been mentioned up until this point, Brian adds a twist to the story. After she rejected me, says Brian, she walked up to me and said this.
She comes over to my wheelchair, she will deny this, but she put her finger on my nose and said, I have a boyfriend.
What?
What? Indeed. Like, why is this the first that we're hearing about that? How has this not been brought up already? Understandably, right? Everyone is confused. But despite Brian claiming that Ingrid would deny it, remarkably, she doesn't. The thing is, as she tries to explain her point of view, honestly, it just makes me even more confused.
No momento eu falei, eu conheci uma pessoa. Talvez no momento ali estava nervosa. As coisas teria que ter acontecido de uma forma mais...
In the moment, I said I met someone. Perhaps I was nervous, she says, which is an interesting explanation, right? She doesn't deny telling Brian that she was seeing someone, although crucially, and this is a very important distinction, she doesn't say that she has another boyfriend, just that she met someone. Now, perhaps that gives us a bit of a clue about her headspace, about her possible motivation. Like, just put yourself in her shoes for a second. She's got a man who she's not comfortable with going down on her. All she wants, right, is to get him to stop and leave her room. And by her own admission, she's nervous. So the question is, could that just have been something she said as a way of stopping him from going further? Was it just an excuse because she didn't want oral from that man? Was it all just made up? Well, Ingrid wants to make one thing very clear. I was single when I was seeing Brian. I definitely didn't have another boyfriend, she says.
Se eu tivesse namorado, ele jamais iria aceitar uma coisa dessa, né? Se não fosse solteiro, eu não tava tentando com o Brian.
Now, disappointingly, we don't get any more clarification about this. They just drop the entire topic at that point. But for what it's worth, in the same way that Ingrid says, if I really did have a secret boyfriend, do you really think he would have accepted something like that? Me going on a show dating another guy? I also think the same thing is true with Brian. Like, ask yourself this, why didn't Brian go running to the camera crew to spill the beans about this earlier? If he really believed that she had a boyfriend, why did he stay in Brazil and continue pursuing her? Like, do you really think that Brian would have continued paying for her, taken her on vacation, met her mum, if he conclusively believed that she had another boyfriend and he had no shot? I don't know, like, it's just a theory. As I say, we don't get any clarification, but I get the impression Ingrid just said that she met someone in that moment because she was nervous and she wanted Brian to stop and get out of her room. Either way, whether true or not, one thing we do definitely know as a fact is that Ingrid didn't want Brian going down on her. She just really wasn't comfortable with him.
Como que eu vou deixar uma pessoa fazer um sexo oral em mim se eu não sei se ele é saudável ou não?
Gonorrhea. And she embraced it, dude.
Trust Leaky Penis Man to proudly chime in with that. Look at the horror on Faith's face. What a thing to be proud of. Now, bizarrely, on the note of sexually transmitted diseases, it's at that point that Sean introduces Brian's daughter, Brianna. Remember, she, from the very get-go, called out her dad for being a passport bro. He has a track record of going to Brazil and getting married on a whim, she told us. And when asked her opinion about Ingrid, Brianna expresses doubt that there was ever any love between either of them. They barely even knew each other, she says. But with Brianna there on screen, it's left to Niles to ask the question we're all thinking.
How old are you exactly?
32. So Ingrid is younger than her.
Ingrid's older. 1 year.
Yeah, as everyone on stage agrees, sorry Brian, but that is weird. That is creepy. Sorry, there's no way that you can validate going onto a dating site and looking for someone who's the same age as your child. Now, not for the first time, Brian just shrugs and swats away any criticism. I've had lots of failed relationships with women my own age, so now I'm working my way down the age ladder, he says. But the problem with that is, let's not forget here, Brian hasn't exactly been honest about his own age, has he?
You lied about your age on the dating site?
On the dating site.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But everybody that knows me for 2 minutes knows my age and my background.
In the same breath, Brian admits he lied about his age, but then also acts like Ingrid should have magically known the truth because he's been so open about it. He somehow spins it back onto Ingrid. She should have known even though I lied, is his logic. And just to make matters worse, for some bizarre reason, despite knowing her dad, knowing his track record and what he's like, Brianna also seems to lay the blame on Ingrid's door too.
It's hard to hear you say that you had genuine feelings for him when there was so much that was unknown. I'm curious as to what did you talk about?
I've asked that question myself. What was this relationship built on when they didn't talk about anything worth knowing? Now, that being the case, it still doesn't quite explain why Ingrid is getting the heat here when Brian is the one that admitted to lying. Ingrid isn't the bad person here. I mean, Brian, he literally admits that he deliberately made Ingrid feel uncomfortable so that he could stress test whether or not she could deal with dating someone in a wheelchair.
Do you think that it's fair that he does that, trying to find out if they can handle his disability?
No, I feel like it's definitely pretty cringy.
Sorry, but how are Ingrid's feelings being questioned here when it's Brian who's so openly manipulative? It makes no sense. Now, thankfully, some of the cast are on Ingrid's side, most notably Vanya and Niles. And it's Niles who actually jumps in to ask Brian what exactly his expectations were, how he expected Ingrid to react when he finally broke the news to Ingrid in such a nonchalant fashion that he used to be a drug dealer.
I just have to ask, you know, the criminal past, Ingrid is supposed to be happy with that because...
I didn't expect to be happy with it.
Brian lied about his age, his past and his relationship history. Every time he dropped a bombshell on Ingrid's lap, we literally saw her with our own eyes, shocked. We saw how taken aback and hurt she was by it all. And yet, despite all of that, when it comes to Brian holding his hands up and being held accountable, it's like water off a duck's back. Brian just deflects it all. Nothing is ever his fault. Nothing.
Por que esse tanto de mulher e nunca deu certo?
But didn't she have 2 kids with 2 baby daddies?
Is it serious?
Wow.
Right, so here they are talking about the number of failed engagements and marriages that Brian has had, and yet completely unprovoked, completely uncalled for, Brian, out of nowhere, decides to bring Ingrid's kids into this. It's a low blow. He's playing dirty here. Frankly, in trying to shame her, he's just showing how pathetic he really is. And credit to her, Ingrid's choice not to bite back, her choice to take the moral high ground, just makes Brian look even worse.
Não, se eu ficar bala contra bala, nunca vai parar. Então deixa ele falar.
Yeah, she's 20 years his junior, but she has a lot more class than him. A lot. And it's at that point that their segment ends. As they wrap up, the final word goes to Brianna. She expresses the hope that her dad will take a break from dating for a while. Yeah, fat chance. And she also says she hopes that he'll take some time out to work on himself. But for as much as she has just said all the right things, those would be good if Brian were to listen. At the same time, she has also spent most of her segment blaming Ingrid. She's avoided blaming her dad for anything, so effectively isn't she also enabling him?
I would love if you took a little break and just kind of take things slowly.
Are you going to listen to her advice?
Probably not.
More than likely not.
Of course he won't listen. Brian doesn't listen to anyone. He's perfect. He knows best. He's going to keep doing what he does, keep repeating history until eventually he hopes he finds a younger lady who'll fit into his mould and agree to be his caretaker. I mean, Brian just proves when he later talks to Vanya and Niles after the segment ends, he just proves how little he's learnt from this whole experience.
I don't have any bad feelings toward her.
No
but
animosity?
No. But just let her blab her mouth and talk her but otherwise, I just let it pass.
Blab her mouth, talk her shit. The way that Brian speaks about Ingrid, from mimicking her earlier to just completely dismissing all of her input to shit, makes me feel like Brian is a guy with a very big problem when it comes to women. Ingrid hasn't been blabbing and talking shit at all, Brian. If anything, she's been very composed. It's Brian with his self-pity and deep insecurity. It's him who can't stop yapping. It's him who's constantly trying to tear her down. Either way, the only good thing to come out of all of this is the fact that these two are no longer together. Yeah, Ingrid really dodged a bullet with that one, didn't she? No pun intended.